Well, good morning, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to week two of the Momentum Summit. I really want to thank everyone for really all of their hard work last week. I heard just so many positive comments about how helpful people found all the sessions. I really want to thank all of the speakers from last week's sessions. I know there was a tremendous amount of work involved in really putting the sessions together, but also, of course, an enormous amount of work that was represented in all of the expertise that was provided to across the system. It was just remarkable how well attended all the sessions were, and really how smoothly it all went. I sort of, I feel like I'm jinxing it. I think there's some wood behind me that maybe I can touch to make sure that I'm not jinxing it for Jonathan. But I just, given the challenges with all of the technology, I think all of this has gone tremendously well. I really want to again thank Jonathan and everyone who's worked on putting the summit together for how wonderfully this has all gone. So this is week two, and what better way to begin week two than to actually hear from the voices that all of this is really about. That it's sort of one of these remarkable things that how often we in higher education, think and talk and work around student success, and then somehow sort of forget that, oh yeah, it'd be a good idea to actually talk to some students and see, well, what do they think about all of this crazy stuff that we're trying to do, and what does momentum actually look like from the vantage point of the students that we are really trying to serve. And so that's what this morning's panel is about, and I am really excited to hear from our student panel. I really want to say a big thank you to them for making time for us today, and to allow us to really hear from them, to hear the honest perceptions about how it is the momentum is perceived on their campus, what it is that means from their perspective, and really what are ways in which we now, as we move forward into the next phase of this work, what are the ways in which we can do that really informed from a student perspective. So with that, I will get out of the way and let the stars of the show actually talk. So I'll hand over to Azelle. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Denley. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on student voices. What a way to get the momentum going on a Monday morning. Thank you for joining us. My name is Azelle Francis, and I serve as the Graduate Research Assistant to the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs. In this capacity, I have the honor and privilege of working with all of the SGA presidents in the University System of Georgia. I'm currently a PhD student at Georgia Institute of Technology, and I will be your moderator today. Hearing from students is a vital but often overlooked part of supporting success on campus. In the midst of all of the work that institutions undertake, understanding the ways students encounter and engage with their schools is essential to supporting their success in the classroom and outside of it, and helping them to achieve their goals. This year has been especially challenging for students and faculty alike. Knowing how to connect and support students and learning from them the ways in which they are supporting one another helps us to truly build a stronger, more resilient institution. We are thrilled to be joined by some student leaders this morning to share their thoughts and perspectives on the past year and what we can learn from it. Today, I am joined by Nathan Graham. He serves as the SGA president of Georgia College and State University. Kareem Leslie, SGA president at University of West Georgia, and Melissa Wolfe, SGA president at Valdosta State University. Kelsey Rios, who serves as the SGA president at College of Coastal Georgia, is unfortunately unable to be with us today. So let me start by allowing our student panelists to give us brief introductions of who they are. Nathan, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. As Zell said, I am the SGA president down in Milledgeville at Georgia College and State University. I see some of my Georgia College fellows in the audience today. But I'm originally from Dublin, Georgia. I'm a senior political science and economics student in going to Washington, D.C. one day, we hope, as we plan for that, pandemic-wise. But I think that's my brief introduction of myself.
Thank you, Nathan. Kareem?
Good morning, everyone. Like Azelle said, my name is Kareem Leslie. I currently serve as a Student Government Association president at the University of West Georgia. I'm currently a graduating senior studying political science and economics, and my plans after this is to go to graduate school.
Awesome. That's cool. Melissa?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Melissa Wolfe, and I'm the SGA president at Valdosta State University. This is my first term, and I'm a graduating senior from Tampa, Florida, with hopes of also going to DC after graduation.
I love all of the post-graduation ambitions. Yes. So let us get started with an initial question about last year. What have you found most challenging about the past year? And we will start with in reverse order. So Melissa, you can go first.
So kind of what I've observed in the last year, both personally and kind of professionally as SGA president, is really just the sense of loss almost. And I mean, I've experienced that with the loss of a typical graduation, the loss of getting to be with my fellow SGA presidents in person, but I've also had countless conversations with students who feel the same thing in a variety of different ways. For example, I spoke with someone just a couple days ago about, athletics being different. I mean, yes, we're having them still, and that's exciting. That's incredible. I know a lot of us didn't think that was going to happen, especially this semester, because it wasn't really happening last semester. So we're grateful for that. But there is still a sense of loss and just missing out on opportunities you expected to have. I mean, from my point of view, it's a lot of, we don't really get a redo. One day, things will be semi-normal. We'll have jobs, we'll be going in person, but we're never going to get to have our senior homecoming again. Stuff like that. So just, I think that would probably be the biggest thing for me.
I really like your framing of that. There's no redo. Thank you. Kareem?
Yeah, like Melissa just said, I would say more so one of the most challenging things about this past year has been that personal connection. Not being able to go to football games like Melissa said, not getting to go against Valdosta as one of our rival schools. But one thing that I also, in addition to all of that, is the opportunity for experiential learning, such as internships. A lot of that has been shifted online. And I do feel like that takes away some sense of knowing what the workplace is like. And that's something that is very difficult to do and achieve during a pandemic, especially last year. But of course, we're becoming used to this new norm right now. So I definitely feel optimistic that we will get adjusted to that. But that's one thing. And another thing in addition to that is having to switch from being face to face to online learning. That was very challenging, especially for certain majors that require like a lot of math. Learning math through PowerPoints aren't necessarily the best thing. So being in class and having to switch back to online was really difficult.
Thank you, Kareem. Last but certainly not least, Nathan.
Oh, please. Thank you, Azelle. So what's been hard, especially like one thing I'll give an example of is last week I walked outside of my office and I just saw a lot of people sitting on front campus just enjoying themselves, which is interesting because you haven't seen that in a while, is people just being outside and being present in certain things. So that's what's been challenging, is the feeling of loss. I've always called myself an introvert, but I like to talk to people. I've been going back and forth on my extrovertness or introvertness, but I would like, as SGA president, I've been in SGA my entire college career, and being able to just pull someone aside into my office and just say, hey, let's talk about this, let's talk, rather than having to think about an extra layer of having someone in such an enclosed space or pulling someone into the conference room and just being like, hey, we need to like having conversations with people. I enjoy hanging out with people. I enjoy talking to friends. And that's the sense of communication that we've all lost. But it's also something that Georgia College prides itself on, and every other institution I've heard of kind of prides itself on, is the being able to access your professors. Now, I don't think the addition of like a virtual office hour or an email is counted as, it's counted as access, but I don't think it gets the true spirit of the situation. And so now we've kind of come to where most colleges feel like the most expensive streaming service we've ever subscribed to. HBO Max is $14.99 a month, whereas college varies like beyond that. And so that's the thing, is getting the worthwhileness out of my college experience has changed with regards to how much we're all like paying into the system. I think it takes true innovation to come up with a new way of handling this, but now that we're kind of, I'm not going to say towards the tail end of this, we're certainly nowhere near the end of it, but we've kind of trying to adjust to a new normal and try and match it with our current reality. So having that connection is gone in some ways, but I've tried to desperately do it through different means, safe means, I would say. But yeah, it's just the hardest thing is being able to professionally do SGA in the way I've been trained to do it, and also live my life in the way that I had done the prior 20 years before all of this new normal came about.
Building upon your insightful remarks and particularly highlighting Nathan's phrasing of the most expensive streaming service that you paid for, I would love to be able to hear from you. What do you guys think schools should really be focusing on to support students now? You mentioned, the sense of loss and the conversion from face-to-face experiences versus online and virtual office hours. And these are some of the, I guess, innovative ways that schools have had to adapt in order for us to be able to continue to excel academically in this pandemic, right? So what would you say schools should be focusing on instead? Perhaps it might be something that we're not doing, or it might be more of what we're doing, or it might be doing what we're doing, but in a slightly different way. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. And we could go with Kareem.
All right. Yeah, so I would say this is more so like a two-part answer for me. Depending on where you are in your education, if you're a first year or sophomore student versus whether you are an upperclassman. For upperclassmen, I would say that being able to plug in students with the various resources that they have, especially going into a job market where a lot of jobs have shut down during this pandemic. So making sure and encouraging those students to feel and know that there are opportunities, and helping them find those opportunities is one thing that schools should be focusing on for this within this pandemic. And then for first year students and sophomore, a lot of these first year students and sophomore students came in when the pandemic started occurring. So helping them find these resources and making sure that they're continuously engaged on campus, because that's a big proponent to whether or not they are successful on campus. So making sure that they're still engaged on campus and making sure that they know where their resources are is something that schools should be working on right now.
Thank you, Kareem. Nathan?
So I am a big proponent of talking about socioeconomics. So prior to the pandemic, a lot of education policy advisors would call college the great equalizer. We have found that the pandemic has proven that not true. Once we disseminated out into our own systems and tried to do university learning from home, we realized that the university gives us resources, but outside of the campus, some of those resources are not present and not available to those students. We've all heard the stories of students doing homework from the Chick-fil-A or Starbucks parking lots. And so we have to focus on what it means, and I believe this is a total diversity and inclusion issue, is it always should include the economic perspective. Is what should we be focusing on students is how to make college that actual great equalizer both on and off campus, so that you can be able to take your education so far as the moon, in this case, if we're going to follow Elon Musk's perspective on things, and maybe even to Mars. So what should we be doing to focus in on students is looking at the issues that not only our affluent students face, but also our less affluent students face. Is how do we make the college experience more equitable across the board? And that means providing services that colleges weren't traditionally going to provide before. Maybe it's legal services, maybe it's X, Y, or Z, but it needs to be a focus on broadening the base that students can attend college. And we all know that high school graduation rates are going to decline over the next few years. So we need to do something now so that we can prepare for that future later. And it's being more competitive in regards to other fields. So that being providing those socioeconomic steps to make college more appealing to a broader base of students, whether that be a different age group or something else to re-educate. So that's where you're going to have to focus, is making college that great equalizer that everyone held it up to be before the pandemic, and actually work towards doing that now, to prepare for the numbers of the future that we know are coming, and also prepare students now so that they feel more pride for their education later on, rather than seeing it as the most expensive streaming service, or just the piece of paper that you receive in the mail after 4 or 5 years of hard work and determination.
Thank you, Nathan. Melissa.
I definitely agree with both of my fellow SGA presidents. Something we talk about a lot at Valdosta State, especially recently, is putting the information in the hands of the students. So I'm definitely in agreement with Kareem and where they're kind of headed over there. And that's a wide variety of things. That could be career opportunities, that could be the counseling center and the Hope Connect initiatives that we've implemented, which I think is incredible, which I've talked about a lot in our different SAC meetings. I think that's something that we're doing very well. And I think that's something that we need to continue with. But like he mentioned, the experiential learning, I think that's crucial, especially in these times, whether it's a virtual internship or it's shadowing one-on-one safely, socially distanced. I think those are also crucial to entering the workforce after.
Building on Melissa's examples from Valdosta, what was the thing your institution did this past year that really stands out to you as being successful in supporting students? And Melissa, I won't come to you first, don't worry, but we'll start with Nathan.
So I can pride myself on a few different things that Georgia College has done, whether it be not coming down so hard on student funding with regards to certain fees that we pay into. There wasn't as many cuts as I thought there were going to be. Now there were cuts, obviously. I mean, we can't all live in the perfect bubble, but it's been where students still had a voice in regards to their budgets, and we still had some freedom to send funds out, and there wasn't a total lockdown of things. Now we've obviously there was like all universities faced a communication issue as to what is allowed with regards to events and certain things like that, but there was still an allowance to have events and to use that student fee money to its best potential. And there wasn't a complete and total lockdown of budget. There's still things we can wiggle room with, and there's things we can still negotiate about. And there's things we can divert money towards. And there wasn't just here's what we're doing, and I hope you like it because you're going to have to get over it situation. there was still some wiggle room, and there was still some room for me and other people in SGA to say, hey, this is still an essential service no matter what, and we can argue about the budget, and we can, or not argue, politely discuss. I don't think we've disseminated into argument yet, and I won't like predict the future, but it's allowing students to still have a control of their campus, even in a time when there feels like such a lockdown on situation. And also asking for student opinion. I know during all of this, Dr. Dorman and I, Dr. Brooks and I, Dr. Spiro and I I would get called into their offices to discuss the issue and find ways of working together with faculty and staff to also push the issue and say, hey, these are things we need to get done. These are things that Georgia College needs to face and what we need to discuss and get things over with. So it just being a continuance on allowing the students to control or not control, but have a voice on campus. That sounded like I was taking over the campus, but allowing students to still have a voice in their campus, even at a time of where most people would lock down and shut things down, we still kept things sort of open in a safe way, but with the pandemic in mind. That's really it, is the continuation of allowing students to have a voice on campus.
So what I'm hearing from you is that inclusion of student voice in the decision-making process, including even the allocation of student fees, was really valuable for you. Awesome. Kareem?
So like Nathan said, at the University of West Georgia, there are numerous things that has occurred within this last year, I would say, to help support students. But the one that stands out to me the most is our opening up of the Momentum Center, which is a building where students can go and get the answers that they need, whether it's financial aid, billing services, counseling, pretty much anything that impacts students. It's a one-stop shop. And it allows students just to go, show up. They don't have to set an appointment. They just go in there, tell them their issues, and then someone will address them. And before they leave the Momentum Center, they will have their answers to the questions, or answers to the questions that they have. So that's probably one of the most significant things that has occurred at the University of West Georgia. But like Nathan said, involving student voices within the conversation about reopening plans and different various aspects is another thing to help support students.
Thanks, Kareem. May I ask how the students who are not on campus were able to access the Momentum Center? Do they have also virtual hours?
They do. So they do have virtual hours as well. So it's not just a one, you have to go in person. They do have a virtual option for you to attend as well.
That's awesome. I think that really builds on what you have shared before. Melissa?
So I think the thing that really made the biggest impact, especially in the heightened chaos of the pandemic about a year ago, was the implementation of concierge coaching. And I know Rob Friedoff is on here. I saw him a little bit ago, but he played incredible role in that. Him, our Vice President of Student Success, Dr. Carr, and actually people over in the HR department who had to train all of these people all came together very quickly with really no model to follow. It was very innovative. And from the student point of view, a student who had a concierge coach who went through that process, it was incredible. I mean, I was in a really weird place at that time. I worked on campus. I was no longer working on campus. I couldn't go home to Florida. My mom was sick. So what was I supposed to do? My concierge coach literally talked me through it. She was like, well, there are these options on campus that are still doing virtual opportunities for telework. And she checked in just to make sure my mental health was still okay. And there were days that it was not. And she called frequently, and which is the model they were supposed to do. And I heard from a lot of people that they were also followed up with rather quickly. I just think it was incredible and it was innovative. And it probably helped a lot of people who wouldn't have reached out otherwise, because no matter what, you got someone. It wasn't like you had to apply for it. We had hundreds of faculty and staff, all the way from custodians to Dr. Carvajal, the president of ESU, calling students just to check in on them. And in the midst of everything else, I know they were stressed as well. They had their own families to worry about, their own jobs to worry about, but they were calling us and they were checking in with us. And I think that if every school implemented something like that, it would make a huge difference.
Thank you for sharing that, Melissa. If you don't mind, could you share just briefly what the concierge coaching model looks like so that everyone that's on the call can get a better sense of what it is?
So what they ultimately ended up doing was getting volunteers that were already employed on campus to get X amount of students and kind of check in with them, almost like academic advising, but it was broader than that. It talked about how your family was doing, how you were doing, mental health, physical health, opportunities for employment, like I mentioned personally. And I was also going through my SGA election at the time, so I was stressed about that. And my concierge coach was actually someone that I had never met prior. It was a staff member that was just one of many that we have here. And so it was kind of nice to have somebody I could talk to without kind of feeling like pressured. It was just a nice relationship and a new relationship too that, I mean, she maintained all the way through the process. And every student just had somebody different. It could have been, like I said, the president, it could have been a cabinet member, it could have been the athletic coaches. I mean, anybody and everybody volunteered their time. And it was months of it. I mean, it went through the summer and it was incredible.
What a fantastic initiative. All three of you really shared key things that your institutions did that really showed the support for students that's so necessary. Let's switch it up a bit. What has been most surprising to you this year with respect to your being in school, whether you were on campus, as I believe all three of you were, or if you had to go home at any particular point? Let's surprise me. Whoever wants to go first can. All right, I'll pick someone. Melissa.
Okay, so for me, I think the most surprising thing was just the desire that I saw from students for the student experience. I mean, you had your typical students prior to this that if they were involved with Greek life, they loved Greek life. If they were an athlete, they loved athletics. But you had some students, I'm not gonna lie, that fall through the cracks. They go to class, they go home, and then eventually they graduate. But I mean, just the average student wanting to do things and our student leaders on campus making that happen for them. And for example, something I've talked about a little bit before is our campus activities board. During the pandemic, when everybody was still at home or wherever they were, they had these quarantine buddies. So it's like a Build-A-Bear, but it had like the cab logo, quarantine buddy, and then they mailed all the pieces to you. And then you made them wherever you were. You stuffed the little bear or the elephant or whatever it was. And then you posted a picture or a video and it spread through social media that way. And I thought that was so unique. And it's just been all these events similar to that. These activities that come prepackaged and students come out of their dorms and they're engaged. And that's the ultimate goal, especially right now when it feels like there really is nothing else going on. And just that, like I said, desire for Greek life events. And although it's disappointing they can't have their formals or different things, there's still one day when they can, they'll be excited to do it. And I think that's really cool.
That is really surprising. An increase in level of desire for student engagement. That's awesome. May we still sign up for quarantine buddies?
I want one so bad, you guys. I never got one. They sold out so quick. So the minute I find out, I'll text you.
Thank you. Next up, Kareem.
So I would say one of the most surprising things was how quickly people are able to adapt to certain circumstances. As I mentioned earlier, going from an face-to-face model to an online class, a lot of students did find it difficult, but it's surprising because last year around this time, having to switch to that online, a lot of students were frustrated about how to get used to that. However, in the spring semester, in the fall semester, you saw the opposite. I would say a lot of students wanted to remain online. So it's just how quick everything can change, and how quickly people are able to adapt to those changes. Another thing that I would say is most surprising is the unity aspect. A lot of people checking in with one another to make sure that people are doing okay. Like Melissa said, at their university, they have the concierge service. At West Georgia, it's more so like a family. So a lot of students were just checking in the Wolfe pack with one another, making sure that everyone is mentally doing okay, physically doing okay, and staying safe during these times right now.
Awesome. So we're seeing an increased level of desire for student engagement, an increased level of care, and we're recognizing how resilient we are as communities and being able to adapt very quickly. Nathan?
I was going to say the giving aspect of many students is whenever everything first shut down, there was people wondering, students who were emailing me asking, what can I do to like deliver food or like deliver groceries to some of the elderly in our community or things like that, because I know many students foresaw that they were going to have a lot more time on their hands with regards to how we were going to handle this. If they were going to be at home for a little while, they were going to have a little bit more time. And so many students were reaching out to me saying, hey, what can I do to deliver food to someone? And one thing I saw in the fall was students who were in quarantine, their friends were calling them saying, hey, can we, like, I would see food containers sitting outside, and I knew it wasn't like DoorDash or anything because there would be a label on it. I knew the difference because I work at a restaurant as well, but there were students who had food, like homemade like food containers sitting outside of their house on their doorstep with food in it, like ready for them to grab and go, because many students were off campus and therefore outside of like the normal reach. And students were taking food to each other's houses, kind of, I mean, it sounds weird, but it sounds like the Southern funeral aspect is whenever someone dies in a family, like food just ends up at your house because there's a big community of people who are just supporting whoever was in quarantine or whoever was just probably also in not a good mental state of mind, just decided to stay home to take a few mental health days, as we all need a few times a year. But the most surprising, like that would be the most surprising thing, is just the caring. Now, students also wanted to get involved. We had more people run for Senate than pre-pandemic. Like compared to last year's pre-pandemic model, we had more people who wanted to run for Senate and get engaged in the system. It's an interesting thing is that people wanted to get involved. I thought it was going to be people were going to enjoy the convenience of staying at home or something. No, everyone wanted to come back. From what our survey said, is around 80 to 90% of our student body wanted to come back. They wanted to be engaged, and if something didn't meet their criteria, I certainly received an email about it because they wanted to do things on campus. The most surprising thing is that the convenience model wasn't as wasn't as enticing as being able to come on campus and having to go from your house to something. Like a lot of people regard college students as kind of I'm not going to say lazy, but they would like to stay in pajamas all day, which, I mean, some people do come to campus in pajamas. I would like to sit at home sometimes, but there were certain students who were just like, no, I'd like to get up and go home. I'd like to get up and go to campus because the only two places I'm currently going are here and to drive to Kroger to pick up groceries for my family. So that was the big difference, is that students wanted to get involved. They were emailing the student activities and organizations director and saying, hey, what can I do? Where can I get involved? And we certainly tried to pair them up. And I'd like to say, for Georgia College's perspective, how much the faculty and staff would like to get involved in our students' lives. There were many faculty that I know of that were checking in on students, just not in an official capacity such as the concierge service, but they were just checking in with their students because our faculty love having that connection with students, and our staff love having the connection with students. As they were also feeling quite lonely in their own homes, and they were like, I'd like to talk to my student from my sociology class or something like that, because we were all reaching out. And I know there were a few like random little book clubs that were popping up from faculty and staff. I attended a few of them. A few of us in the poli-sci department, we would just meet online during the summer. This wasn't even paid for, is just meeting through WebEx or Teams and having a discussion of all the political events that were going on in the day. So it was just the amount of connection that was wanted. Prior to that, we were taking that for granted. It's like, oh, I can skip on this lunch. I will say today, I will never skip another lunch with a friend post this pandemic. I will go to every lunch. I will make time. I do not care. I will go. It's just that level of connection that people want. We thought of it as like a normal status, but it turns out to be much higher than we actually thought, because you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
You don't know what you got till it's gone. I feel like Dr. Jones should start singing here. So I would love to hear from you how SGA has worked with the university administration to really continue this support of students. What are you most proud of? And we could start with, I think I just started with Melissa. So let's start with Kareem.
So I would say our SGA during the reopening phase, as I hinted at earlier, we were fully engaged within the various committees that was going on to make sure that student input was being considered into the decision-making process. Most often you would find that what faculty, staff, and administrators think would be what students want is actually in reality what students don't want. So it's really interesting being a part of these committees and listening in to see all of that stuff, and continuously having that even after the reopening phase, being engaged in various committees across campus, from our smallest committee, like parking and appeals, student input is in it, to all the way up to our larger scale, such as strategic planning and all of that stuff, making sure that student voices were a part of that process, is one thing that I feel like needs to be had to make sure that you can continuously support and capture the input of students. Another thing I would like to add is that making, even outside of SGA, because SGAs only make up a certain portion of the student body, I would say, but making sure that you're utilizing students within departments, academic departments, because you would be, you have the opportunity to see what students in your specific major would like to have. So making sure that you're able to do that is something that is needed.
Yes, definitely. As SGA, you serve as the voice of students, but you have to be sure that you're serving as the voice of all students. So being sure that you're bringing in students who may not necessarily be serving on SGA, but reaching out to your student population is super important. Nathan?
So including in that wonderful answer is that reaching out to students, but also I don't know about the other universities, but here, like, I have a certain power to appoint students to different committees around campus. My one focus was to make sure that not everyone I appointed was from SGA. Even though they are representatives and some of them are elected and some of them are appointed by me, is to also point out that some people in SGA just are there's skill sets outside of SGA that some SGA members don't quite possess. It might be a different skill set that may, like, for one instance, I appointed someone to something called the Public Art Committee that we have here at Georgia College. Now that might sound like some mundane committee, but it's actually a committee that decides the overall look of the campus with regards to how things are placed and where things go. It provides the imagery of Georgia College as an institution of diversity and inclusion, because we also include like different projects from varied backgrounds. But also appointing students to the student technology fee is that we have a big fund for student technology. Now, while a lot of SGA usually attracts a lot of political science and economics students, but we do, and I've tried to diversify that as much as humanly possible. I know some majors can't be reached, such as nursing and education, because they're spending a lot of their time off campus. But it's trying to reach out to those students to get a broad perspective of things and putting them in positions of power to make their voice directly heard. Many students want their voice heard, and then I challenge them by saying, well, here's a position, you go and make your voice heard. Because I'm not the voice I try to be, but I can't be. Some things are not going to be as black and white as I live in a world of nuance. So that's one thing, is reaching out to those broad perspectives, continuing to reach out and hear feedback from them whenever they can't be in the room, is so I can project that out to the entire administration. But also the close connection I've made with upper administration. Now, many of them I already knew from my prior positions in SGA, but some of them I didn't meet with one-on-one. I would just see in passing sometimes. And what we've been doing is in SGA is I've met more with Dr. Dorman and Dr. Brooks and Dr. Spiro than some SGA presidents in the past. And I've met with other people within the university administration more than other SGA presidents have in the past, because those issues are now prevalent. Those issues are now in the forefront of things. And we've also been including more students in those meetings. So we've recently started just an overall panel of students at Georgia College to advise Dr. Brooks and Dr. Dorman and Dr. Spiro on kind of the messaging of the university, and kind of just getting a diverse group of students. So from our Black Student Alliance, from our Latino Student Alliance or Association, and getting them in the room as well, because sometimes their voices aren't correctly said by SGA, and that's a fault on SGA that we need to correct on. But while we could use those organizations to help SGA learn and help the entire institution learn altogether. So it's including that student feedback. It's getting more student feedback than just SGA's, because even though we consider ourselves like the top of the organization food pyramid, I don't think we are. I think we're included in rest in the organizations. We just have a different expertise compared to the other organizations on campus, is that we can all come together and broadly send out our input to administration, which we're doing right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. Melissa?
Our SGA has a great relationship with our upper administration, which is something that I'm very thankful for. It's something that I've observed in past SGA administrations with our university admin, and I hoped to continue that when I took on this role. And to have their support has been crucial to, I think, our success this year, and also maintaining those relationships with other student organizations, getting their feedback, going to their meetings, listening to what's on their agenda. And they come to ours as well and make input on our agenda. And I think that community aspect is crucial to actually getting things done, because we could have things on our SGA agenda that are completely different than what other student organizations need. I mean, we're all so different here, which is one of my favorite things about Valdosta State. I mean, there are students, we're a border state tuition institution, so we have students from everywhere, different point of views, different ideas, and our administration is receptive to all of those ideas. So it's been really nice working with them on different things. And we also have students serve on the various task force initiatives that our president sets forth. I'm on our COVID task force, and I attend those meetings bi-weekly, and I have ever since March. And we also have this year a new diversity and inclusion task force that Dr. Carvajal appointed due to a resolution that came from SGA urging more communication, more data, more conversations about this topic. And I think the only way to actually get things done is if we collaborate, and it can't just be one it can't just be faculty senate, it can't just be COSA, it can't just be admin, it can't just be SGA. All of those forces have to come together. Otherwise, we're just sitting around talking. But to see actual change, it's a group effort.
Thank you, Melissa. So I'll actually stick with you because you said something critical. So to be great student advocates, we need to be able to listen. How can schools capture broader input from students on their needs?
Something that we've found pretty useful here at Valdosta State is surveys and tabling, which was very difficult to do last semester, but we're very grateful that this semester it's been a little bit more doable. We work with event services, we get things set up so we can be safe and clean and be outside and talk to students. We've done a few already this semester, whether it's on mental health, just to check in how students are doing, a welcome back survey, just a variety of different things. And having those conversations with students is so important. And I think that that is, honestly, hearing it straight from the students is how you get the truth. I mean, you can do as many emails and as many virtual kind of surveys as you want, but when you look someone in the eye and you can see kind of how they're doing and how they feel about it, I just think that impacts how we move forward.
Thank you, Melissa. Kareem, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say on top of that, in terms of administrators, faculty, and staff, I would say even attendance those other student organization meetings as well is one way that you can get a lot of input. Our president, Dr. Kelly, he attends our meetings as well as a lot of other meetings throughout our university in terms of student organizations, and that proves to give different viewpoints on certain initiatives that the university may be considering and help them push a certain agenda. So like Melissa said, and then what I said as well.
Thank you, Kareem. That's a great idea. Attending many student organization meetings. Nathan?
Oh, I would totally agree with that. My favorite thing to do, I can't really do it not like now, is because you kind of have to sign up for the Zoom link or something. But my favorite thing to do was, as a senator and as chief of staff, was to walk in to a random meeting. Sometimes I would just pick out, I would see an email saying, hey, environmental science club or gardening club is meeting this week. And I would just walk in. And thankfully, the student body of Georgia College is a very welcoming sense, is that you can just walk into something and people will just be like, hey, who are you? Like getting to know you a little bit. Some people in the room already knew me because I've made myself well apparent around campus, but is to walk into those meetings and say, hey, I'd like to hear about this, or asking questions. It doesn't have to be a formal like town hall event. It can just be I would recommend this to anyone, is to walk into a student meeting and just say, hey, and just kind of have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a town hall format. While I also recommend in the virtual sense and post-pandemic is a listening session. In the wake of the George Floyd murder and many of the police brutality incidents, our Office of Inclusive Excellence had a task force regarding that, and then started with 2 listening sessions. And I was unfortunately unable to attend those, but Dr. Denard and my director of multicultural affairs sat in on that listening session, and they got some really good feedback from students. And it was raw feedback. It wasn't like something that someone manicured themselves. It was very detailed feedback of how students felt about those certain issues. So I would recommend those. I would sit there and let students just go off at you. It's going to be tough to hear, but in the embraceness of diversity and inclusion, it's not going to be comfortable. Let me go ahead and tell you, comfortability is not how change is made. It's going to be rough, and it's going to be very blunt. And I certainly have felt the end. I've been on the end of yelling at someone and been at the end of getting yelled at by someone. And that's how it's going to be. It's going to be a very rough edged sword of things. That's what I can say, is just go out and listen, and with the intent on actually making change. Don't go into a listening session just to say you did the listening session or the random walk-in or the random town hall just to say, we actually heard from students. Do that with the intent of saying, I'm going to make these changes. I'm going to be reactive to the student opinion. Now, if it's like building a parking deck on your front campus, obviously those changes can't be made, but you can suggest different ways and work with students to come up with different solutions to problems instead of just saying, well, I went to the listening session, that's all done for me. It's going in with that very intent listening point of view. So I would say have good intentions, set up an event, or just be yourself, or try and be a more listening focused version of yourself when going into this. That's all I can really say, is just listen out with the intent of making some changes. It's going to be uncomfortable. That's my final thing on that.
So hold that uncomfortable thought. At this time, we would like to open it up to questions. If you have a burning question, feel free to place it in the chat and we'll try to get to a few of those. So again, if you do have a question for our student panelists, feel free to type that question in the chat and we will get to a few of those. So Nathan, so I'm gonna push you just a little bit on your uncomfortable conversations. What would you say, and this question goes to all of the panelists, what do you believe are the critical conversations that schools should be having right now with their students? Again, what are the critical conversations that schools should be having right now with their students? And Nathan, I'll start with you.
So it really is asking the question of, what would you like your university to look like? What would you like how would you like your university to function? And that's the basic system at all. Going through my entire SGA career and talking with different people, we see higher education as a business. That is what I've been told. That and my own agreement with that is varying, but what we should question is, when does it stop being a business? Because whenever I hear it's a business, it's when we're talking about money. But when we talk about a business, there are different aspects to a business we aren't truly focusing on, is who's paying the business, who's paying into the business. And the answer to that question, unbelievably, is students and their whatever trust fund or whatever system that they have to pay into the system. But it's students. And so how do we be more receptive to students, and what questions should we be asking students? And that being I just got a message, I'm sorry. It threw me off there for a moment. But it is asking how you want your campus to function, and what we can do within the letter of the law to change the way that the university works to fit who are the customers within the business, and that being students. Now, I don't want to detract from the staff and faculty perspective of this, because they are also a functioning portion of the university. It is a functioning triangle of students, faculty, and staff, and you can't be the perfect triangle without those three components. But you have to ask, how do you want your university to function, and can it be done? The critical conversation is what services should we be providing to meet a socioeconomic downturn that we've reached in the university system? How do we make college more equitable for students? How do we respond to certain crises on campus? And should we respond in some things? Is there something that happens off campus that the university should respond to? Yes or no? You should start by asking having that critical conversation. It's a critical conversation of like how we want the makeup of campus to be, and what can we all do as a university to pitch in. Like, I can't exactly pinpoint what exact conversation we should be having, but it's the overall function of the university and the overall understanding of what we can get out of our money, because if we're going to treat it like a business, you're going to have to focus on the student experience. And that's certainly, that can or can't happen with certain administration and certain administrative tactics that we've seen in the past. And I think the biggest problem is communication, is how students are being communicated to by their university. Are we communicating from a perspective that, are we realizing that we are a privileged bunch in the higher education space, or are we not truly responding to the student experience because we just want to put out a statement to make ourselves feel better? I know this just sounds like a bunch of rambling, but this is like the overall like messiness of the critical conversation students should be having, or the faculty and staff and students should be having. But that's it, is asking the questions of what is the function of the university, how do you want the university to look, and what should the university be doing to serve students both on and off campus and for years to come, because it goes beyond the 4 or 5 years you're here. And should we be looking, how forward should we be looking, and how adaptive should we be to certain situations? Again, very rambly, but very like, it's a whole complicated issue of higher education as to what we should be doing as a school, because we can go in a million different directions, or we can focus on one. I can't give you this very distinct answer on that one, but that seems like something that's well above my pay grade at some level.
If the answers were simple, we won't be having these conversations. So we appreciate it. Melissa, any thoughts?
I think for us over here, definitely the conversation about diversity and inclusion and how that ties into campus safety, which are two very different things. But what I've found this year is that they're very connected. I started out this year with the intention of having diversity and inclusion conversations, and we saw some results with the task force. But as we went on, it kind of morphed into, how do we make students feel safe on campus? Because there's no way to ensure that. You can't promise that, but you can inspire it. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. And I think further conversations on that, and how we, like I said, inspire it, and how we promote campus safety and buddy systems, and without calling it a buddy system, because no one wants to do that, but just different things like that, and how we move forward, especially with everything going on in the world outside of our little system that we're going to be embarking upon. But it kind of makes its way in before you even get there. I mean, the issues relating, I won't go into it, but the issues of the election and all of those different things that happened around us absolutely infiltrated our campus. I don't know about others. It infiltrated our student government association. We were having conversations I didn't plan on having, but things that needed to be addressed so we could move forward. And I think that that's the direction we're all going to be kind of going as life goes on. So.
Thank you, Melissa. Kareem?
Yeah, like Nathan and Melissa both said, I'm going back to what Nathan said. Yeah, wait, that's the foundation for everything, but how do we build on top of that? So I would say, in terms of critical conversations, like Melissa said, we should be talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity, making sure that students have access to the things that they need, and diversifying university campuses is something that also needs to be happening as well. I would say another critical aspect to all of this is mental health. That's something, this is my second term as SGA president, and this is something that we've been talking about since last year, and probably even before I was a part of the SAC body. But it's definitely something that we need to be considering, how we can ensure that students know about mental health, how they can have access across campus to mental health, and continuously pushing that, because I feel like mental health is one of those essential things, because it can impact how you perform inside of the classroom, outside of the classroom, and what kind of motivation that you may have across campus.
mental health, diversity and inclusion, how outside campus activities affect inside campus activities. These are all of the conversations that we definitely have year after year as being critical to the functioning of the university. So great points. So we have a lot of fantastic questions in the chat. I will try my best to combine so that we can get to as many of them as possible. So we've had this conversation surrounding how schools can do better at reaching their students and how we can get the information out there. You mentioned that, listening tours, for example, or listening sessions was one great way for faculty and staff to get feedback from students. Now, this question focuses on the other side of that coin. What creative ways do you recommend to get information out to students about resources? So the question then goes on to ask specifically, what have you found to be the best and worst methods from the university? So to reach students for engagement questions, like what are students truly paying attention to? And we can start with Melissa.
This is a fun question. I'm excited about it. Okay, so this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about and having conversations with students about. The email infiltration has got to stop. I don't know how we stop it. My brain thinks about different ideas constantly, but it needs to be succinct. It needs to be organized. I think email is effective when it's done properly. When they're just being shot at you or they're just being approved at, oh my gosh, in the middle of the night's the worst. But when it's just going out all at once, it absolutely gets lost. I think that there needs to be, whether it's different, more like succinct aliases or times of days where it's student experience in the morning or academic in the afternoon or something like that, to make that a little bit more organized. Because sometimes I see dance club and I miss an email from my advisor, you know what I mean? And it's not until later in the afternoon, hours later, where it's like, oh my gosh, I really needed to respond to that. But I think one of the best ways that we have found at Valdosta State is social media. And I think that they each have their own job to do. Each social media platform has its own job to do. I think that we found that with our listening sessions and town halls, Facebook and YouTube are definitely the best. When it's just information that needs to kind of get shot out to people, putting it on Instagram, whether it's on the story or a post, especially if it's information that needs to be shared. If it needs to be shared, 100% Instagram. It'll end up on everybody's story if it's pretty and if it's effective information. And I think that sounds dumb if it's pretty and if it's kind of effective, but that's how it spreads and that's how news gets around. For example, just last week we made a commencement announcement and it got shared I don't know how many times. And by the next morning, there wasn't anyone who didn't know about it. And I think that that is the best way to communicate with students right now, just making it something that they want to see and that they send to their friends or to whoever.
Melissa, isn't your major marketing?
Communication. Yeah.
See? I'm like, this is your area.
I know.
You are a resident expert. I love it. Thank you. That point about the time of day and perhaps grouping the communication was really interesting. And I think that's something that we haven't really discussed as much. Kareem.
So in terms of communication, I see it as a cycle, like one of these cycles. If you push emails too much, students will tune out of emails. If you push text messages too much, they will eventually tune out. So trying to find that right balance between the two is what's critical. But like Melissa said, we also had the same experience. Last week, our university announced our commencement ceremony plans, and it was shared because of the social media aspect. So I feel like it depends on what the goal is of that marketing. If you're just trying to get information out, you can send a text message, you can send an email, but if it's something that needs to be shared, it's so easy to share information on social media. So being able to just hit the share button, definitely utilize social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and utilizing the university's hashtag. I would say the best aspect is to use social media. The worst is probably email, though.
Emails are not a popular mechanism right now, I see. Nathan.
I love email, but yes, it has its flaws in many ways, shape, or form. For communication of certain like surveys or news, you can also, other than utilizing social media, I'm pointing directly at our admissions department, who has started doing TikTok as well, which is fun. I never thought that admissions would beat us to the TikTok game. I'm good at viewing TikToks, not good at making TikToks. But anyway, using other approaches such as, students go to class, at least we hope they go to class, utilizing faculty as well. Like you can say, hey, you can participate in this, getting faculty to send things out. Because I get emails from my professors regarding certain events. We recently had a tree planting ceremony for one of our faculty members that passed away a few years ago. And my senior seminar professor sent it out to all of us because I didn't even know it was going on, and I'm the SGA president. Like this is like something was going on and I just didn't know about it. So using those faculty you have one department send something out, and varying your size of department, you're going to reach quite a bit more students than perhaps even your own social media will. So using those class lists to help get information out. I know I've used professors in the past to say, hey, can you send out this to your to all of your classes, saying this survey or that survey, just so I can get more people involved. And sometimes there are events that SGA wants students to attend that faculty are willing to offer certain bonus points for showing up, or some academic credits or something. So using the resources you have and using your connections with faculty, that goes to all staff members, that goes to students who want to get something out in the open, is critical to getting feedback on certain things, and can be used to send out those surveys. Because I know the emails we get an email every morning at 11 o'clock, and it's called our front page digest, and people have submitted different things to that. And eventually I know some students who have permanently blocked that email from sending things to them. And that's a critical way we get out information regarding class cancellations or something like that, if there were a weather incident. So those certain things, you can use faculty for that, you can use staff for that, just getting students to send things out. It may be through email, and that's kind of adding to the issue. But if you receive an email from your professor, I think you're more inclined to look at it than something from the university. Now that may be different for certain students, but that certainly is something. They could also include it in something about an assignment, and then they include hey, this thing is going on. So it has that duality there.
Key takeaway is that there's not really a one size fits all, but that you have to try a diversity of approaches that can work. And then I think one part of utilizing your resources would also be, I'm sure that all of you and your SGAs would be willing to also be more actively involved. Students love being able to help determine how things are communicated to other students. So also just utilizing these students on your campus to give you honest feedback as to if your marketing and communication approaches are working or not. We have a question specifically for you, Nathan. What would a public university look like if it were funded in a way to not look at itself as a business, but rather a public service? What university services and or focuses would change, disappear, or improve?
Lord have mercy. Redesign the university system, Nathan, go. No, I appreciate this question. Seeing things as a public service is a different kind of question. Is how are we going to fund certain things? And I believe it would mean, certain services would immediately be cut off, and there'd be more accountability with regards to how universities are funded. I would hope in my quest to be a public servant, I would hope there being more accountability. I certainly would believe that the SGAs and the organizations with them would hold more power in certain things. I can't exactly say what university services or focuses would change, like would be removed, but I think it would be an increased focus on serving the students who are here and kind of paying into the system, or however this public service would work as like a whatever system. But it would be an increased focus on what services students would want, and there'd be quicker changes with regards to how money is diverted to certain programs. So like, I'm assuming transportation services would increase. There would be more focus on social mobility with regards to student activities, and I would hope there would be an increased focus on student. I don't know about the, like, if there, what inefficiencies would come from this is I've taken one class on public economics, but I know it can be a varying degree of, like, I don't know how much red tape would also come into this, because there is a certain aspect to government that there is just a sluggish process to change, and being a business kind of gives us the ability to kind of be faster with response compared to a public service. So I believe this is Mr. Jeff. I am sorry, I can't really like design the new university system in a public sense, but we are a public university. I think we should be responsive to those who are paying into the system, that being students. But we should also, and someone brought this up later on, is that students are eventually products of the university, and that we should also be catering towards the organizations and companies that hire our graduates. So I think we should be adaptive to those things as well as to finding out. And I think that would be more of the focus under a system of public services, that we'd be able to focus on what things matter to students more, and what things matter to the products of our university more, rather than the weird system we're currently in now. But yes, I can unfortunately redesign the university system. Now, if you'd like to collaborate, we can get started now. I have about 9 to 12 weeks left in the state of Georgia. So let's get started. We only got 12 weeks to redesign, so we can take that. That's easy.
Thank you, Nathan, for your insightful comments. We'll now move to our last question from the audience, and this is directed at all three panelists. What types of approaches, services, or programs do you feel universities need to continue that were started during the last 12 months? And we could get started first with Kareem.
I would say one of the things that has began in the last 12 months that needs to be continued after is just the opportunities for virtual engagement. I know we're living in a virtual environment right now, and it could become very tiring, but I definitely feel in the future that this is something that will be beneficial, because it allows you to connect with people that you would not normally be able to connect with outside of this type of environment. So this is something I would say that needs to continue going into the future.
Yes, what would the future of work look like without virtual opportunities, or perhaps more virtual opportunities? Melissa?
I would say the Hope Connect initiative, and if that eventually evolves into something else that's not kind of the system-wide thing that we're doing, and it's maybe institution-based, I think that's crucial moving forward, because I think that we're entering a whole new world. Like, I know that sounds kind of weird, but like nothing is really the same as it was 12 months ago. And I think that keeping that in mind is going to be important, as, I mean, I won't be here anymore, but I think that incoming classes, and as these high school students and these middle school students eventually get here, they're also going to be thinking differently. They're going to have different priorities, and they're going to have different experiences that we need to cater to. And I think that the use of 24/7 mental health services, psychiatric services, counseling that's through text message is innovative and is going to be very helpful as we kind of navigate this new normal.
As we navigate this new normal, turning to Nathan.
I agree. I believe that the university goes beyond the 9-to-5 schedule. Students work 24 hours a day. I've done homework at 2 a.m. and I know my other two SGA presidents have, and denying it would just be a subtle lie to these 211 participants. But I think that should be through the increased use of those virtual experiences, that technology. I'm a big proponent of like Microsoft Teams and sometimes WebEx Teams. So like whenever you're designing your classroom with Teams, you can set up your classes and include students in it, and they can pretty much message you 24 hours a day as long as they have access to Teams. And that being the best thing, one of the best things you can do is being more available to your students. I know some of us cut off the timeline at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We go home and do certain things, but if we're going to be more responsive to students, we're going to have to be responsive to their hours, and that including the 24/7 mental health services. I mean, I've used the service. It's great, and it's something that I never thought the university would, or our like the entire education system would ever embrace, is because we like to tightly control like all of our services rather than contracting out our services. But the cost of doing that is so unaffordable. It's basically laughable. So contracting out to those private entities that can handle that level of engagement is certainly something we can continue to build off of, and I hope we can continue to fund in the future, and hope to improve. But even from the academic perspective, is having those certain technological experiences that you can easily, like if a student's working on something at 8 o'clock at night, I'm not asking any professor to stay up till 2 a.m. with a student, but if you want to, God bless you. But being more open to students and like hopping into a video chat with them like at 8 o'clock at night, or if a group of students is working on something around 8 or 9 o'clock at night and you have the time to send a message or to hop into a video chat with them while they're sitting in a study room, that can be something that can be done, and have a little like supplemental instructional time, or give them something else that it builds off of their classes. Now, I don't want to overrun the faculty either. So also looking toward those other online resources. I never thought I'd love Khan Academy as much as I used to back in middle school and high school, but they have helped remind me of certain things that I can do. So also recommending more of those virtual resources that we were eventually going to switch to anyway further on, but the pandemic has just exacerbated. So using those virtual opportunities and using that technology is probably the best thing we can do for students going forward.
Thank you. In true Student Government Association style, we cannot end today's session without asking each of you to leave our audience with a nugget or a pearl of wisdom. If they can take anything away from the conversation today, what would you like them to hold on to? And we can go first with Kareem.
One piece of wisdom I would like to leave with you all is continuously engage with your students on campus, because their input is going to be something that can help diversify and also make better decisions in the long run. So just continuously engage with your students.
Continuous engagement. Melissa.
Mine is probably just to continue to communicate and really listen when you're having these conversations, be intentional about it, and also just continue the understanding. I know that we've all had to kind of readjust what being an understanding and supportive kind of staff or faculty member or SGA president looks like this year. And it's going to continue to evolve, but just to always be there for the students. And thank you for doing that thus far.
Thank you, Melissa. Active listening. Nathan, last but certainly not least.
Oh yes, we're gonna end on me. I'm the like runt of the litter with regards to my other SGA presidents. Anyway, the best thing I can tell you is never stop innovating. Never stop redoing your teaching methods. I know some professors teach for 30 years and they have taught the same way since they did in 19 whenever, before I was born. And I think you should never be. So one thing that we've tried to teach students is that your education goes beyond your 4 or 5 years here. You're always learning, you're always adapting, and you're always needing to do that. So why not follow that yourself? Why not update your teaching methods, embrace things that your students are doing, that you're certainly comfortable with, obviously, but embrace those things. And if you don't know how to do certain things, always be willing to ask. Like you should not be embarrassed to say, hey, I don't know how to operate this certain thing and I would like to learn. That's an entire point of higher education, is to learn. But certainly just keep on innovating, keep on changing the way we educate students, because students are certainly going to change. And I think it would be better for the whole faculty staff student relationship to continue to innovate upon your teaching methods above and beyond. I think I've met professors who were still in their ways from 20 years ago, and those are professors I fondly remember as good professors, but the difference between good and great is that innovation. And so certainly you could try doing that. And I mean, that's the nugget of wisdom I can leave to you as a 21-year-old who is about to enter the brink of the job market. So I will certainly have to innovate my practices as I go and try and apply for jobs now.
As we bring this session to a swift close, we would like to ensure that this is just the beginning of this conversation. And we really want to encourage everyone to continue the momentum on including student voices in all of these conversations surrounding student success in order to truly build a more supportive, a more inclusive, a stronger, and certainly a more resilient university system of Georgia. Thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for your time. Thank you, panelists, for your pearls and nuggets of wisdom. We appreciate you.
Fantastic.